It is indeed a Friday, as you can tell from the non-advertising type shirt. And I decided to talk today about the backdrop. A lot of people have asked about this. And so I did a video, I don't know, a month or so ago where I said, by the way, everybody, in case you're curious, the background behind me has in fact changed because I've moved my studio. And I mentioned that the old studio, the one that had the backdrop with the license plates and all the junk, was in a garage. And in the garage, it would get hot. There was an air conditioner in there, but if I turned the air conditioning on, it made too much noise. So I had to shut it off when I shot videos, which was fun, but, it would get warm. And there's nothing worse than being on camera with lights, and then you start feeling hot and sweaty. And then you're like, how shiny am I right now? You don't want to be shiny on video. So I decided to move the studio. And I decided to move the studio into an indoor space. So right now, the studio is in the house. And it's kind of like the difference between a dog you keep outdoors and a dog that lives in the house. So trust me, the camera is happier. The camera is happier. But here's the story that you'll find interesting about the backdrop. So I didn't have to tell anybody, but I kind of felt it was important to do this. So I have a friend named Dana. And Dana is a really good guy. I've known him for a few years now. And he is a retired auto worker. And he, in his retirement, has a bunch of hobbies. And he's got a bunch of really cool toys like I do. He's got some chainsaws and things like that. So we talk about that. But also, he's a woodworker. He's a woodworker, and he's got a wood shop, and he makes stuff in his shop. And so I was talking to him about moving my studio. And I said, I'm thinking about moving my entire studio inside. And he said, oh, okay. And I said, the sad part is I can't take that wall with me. And I pointed at the wall that was in my studio, and it was attached to the wall. It was, in fact, a wall. And the reason I say that is this right here is a faux wall. This is actually a backdrop. And I'll put up a photograph. And by the way, I'll admit, I'm actually torn about this. Because once you see what it looks like backed up, it might ruin the illusion. But I've had so many people ask me, I think you guys will appreciate it. So he looked at the wall and he goes, what's so hard about that? And I go, well, I would tear it down and replace it and put it back up behind me, but I don't want to damage this wall. And he goes, no. He goes, I can make you one of those. And I go, make me one of what? And he goes, I can make you a wall like that. That's not hard. And I go, really? And he goes, yeah. He goes, just look at this. He goes, all it is these boards that go diagonally, and a center board there. And again, I apologize for the edits. I'm just clearing my throat. He goes, but there's a center board and those side boards. And he goes, it looks like pine to me, and it's not that hard. He goes, we measure the width of the boards and buy a bunch of them and mount them on something and cut them to fit. And he goes, it looks to me like the guy who put this together used tongue and groove on all the sides, but he didn't on the vertical board. He goes, which I think he should have done. And so immediately Dana is going to upgrade the wall. I said, Dana, if you're going to make me the wall, I want it to be a duplicate of the wall that's here. He goes, I can do that for you. He goes, but why would you want me to do it wrong? Man had a point. I go, Dana, here's what I want you to do. You replicate this wall as accurately as you can, and I'll compensate you for that. Whatever you think is appropriate. He's okay. Came with a tape measure, took a bunch of root measurements and so on, dimensions. And then later on, he called me back to get a couple more dimensions. And then he started working on it. Now, this was not his number one job on the planet. He has other things he's doing. So I would stay in touch with him. And it turns out, among other things, and I apologize for not knowing this, but the width of these panels is not a standard size. It was not a standard size. So he had to actually get wider panels and cut them. While he was doing that, he did the old tongue and groove thing on all of the panels that go this way. And then on the vertical panel and on the ends, he did tongue and groove on all of those also. He goes, so 10 years from now, this will still look like this. Meanwhile, the one that was in the studio outdoors, in the garage, he goes, that one you could see where it's already starting to warp and curl and stuff because of the lack of tongue and groove in that one section. I'm like, oh, okay. So he goes, I'm building it better than it was, but it'll look so close that it'll be the same. So then a couple weeks ago, he sent me a note and said, Steve, I'm looking at different colors of stain. And he had stained a couple boards, different colors. And I said, I like this one here. He goes, I'll go with that one. He stained it. And then I think it was Thursday or Friday of last week, he contacted me and said, Steve, I'm ready to install it. I'm ready to install it. I said, okay, great, bring it on over. So he came over with his son, Josh, who was helping Dana, his father. And they pulled up with a trailer and this thing in the back. And they went to lift it, and it weighs like 10 million pounds. It's heavy. It's very heavy. Because those boards are all backed on a piece of plywood with a big old stand. It's on 2x4s and a base. And brought it up here, assembled it. At one point, I got to hold one end of it, and I think it might be the heaviest thing I've moved in 10 or 20 years. Very heavy. And put it in here, brought it in, and immediately realized that because this roof, the ceiling right here is sloped, that my bookcase needed to be moved 6 inches, and this bookcase is filled with stuff. So I had to partially disassemble the set and move it all 6 inches. And then we slid this back in there, put it in place. There you go, boom. And then I put all my junk back, and then I put it all up, and there we are. So that's the backdrop behind me, replicating the old studio. Now, after I put it up the first day, and I posted a couple videos, I had a whole bunch of people go, Steve, you're back in your old studio, which is a good compliment for Dana, because people didn't think, oh, you've duplicated your studio. They go, oh, you've moved back. So I said, no, it's actually my new studio with a new wall. And I had a few people go, I'm glad you told me that, because I honestly thought these were old videos. But again, that's a compliment to Dana and his work. Now, I had originally thought about asking him to do the backdrop for me. And then when it was ready, moving the studio. But I couldn't time that, and I didn't want to press him on time either. But I can tell you that to move the studio, I shot a couple videos one day at the old location outside, moved everything inside, and I had, in essence, 24 hours to get it set up for the next batch of videos. I could have shot some in advance, give myself 48 hours, but I managed to do it quickly. So that's why there is a strip down set for a little while there in between. And so I think it looks great. I will tell you one thing I've changed, and this is something I should have done in the old studio, but I didn't. So I think there's 8 license plates on the wall behind me. And in the old days, I put those up using double-sided tape. I just take tape, stick it on the back, and stick it on the wall. And the problem is that once in a while, the tape wouldn't stick. And I'd walk in, shoot a video, and I'd be editing the video, and I'd look, and there'd be 2 license plates that are like this. I'm like, oh, I go back in, move it up, and then I've actually seen it during a video where it slips. So yesterday, I broke out a tape measure, a hammer, and nails. And I put little gold nails all across the top, so where I can just hang the plate on the nails, and then if I want to, I can take that plate off, put another plate on. So the plates behind me might change more often, because people have been asking me where all my plates went. I still have them all. I still have got a ton of license plates. So I will rotate through them. Some I like to leave on the set more often, but I will get them all on the set at one time or another, rotate through them, but I don't ever get rid of the license plates. I love the license plates. But the one thing that I did not ask Dana to replicate, because it would be too much work, simply because it would have just added a level of complication to the build. But the old studio, this is how you know where I am right now. The old studio had a shelf right about this height. It was a black shelf, and it was fairly narrow. Black shelf on both sides, and that's where the swords were sitting. And I also had all of my marathon and half marathon medals sitting on that shelf over there. That shelf is not here, so that's how you know it. And also, I know some people have spotted this also. There's a gap right here you can see on both sides. And the reason that gap is there is that the legs for the wall needed to be sticking forward slightly. And so there is a backdrop, and the backdrop comes down, and from the side, it's got legs sticking up both ways. We don't want it to tip either direction. And so the legs sticking forward had to go someplace, and so it goes right here. So that's that, and that's the genius of the backdrop. I didn't design it. I didn't have anything to do with it other than I told Dana, you could make me one of these? And it was incredulous because he offered to. And he said, yeah, kind of like, of course. okay. And he built it better than the one I had behind me before. And he said, Steve, trust me, years from now, this will still look like this because of the way I did all the tongue and groove work and all that. So Dana does great work, and he's one of these guys I can call on an instant's notice and go, hey, I've got an emergency. Can you help me with it? And he does that, takes care of me. So I appreciate that. But that's the explanation about the wall. I'm not sure if there's anything else I should tell you about it other than it is simply an attempt to bring the old wall back onto the set. And I've had a few people, and this is one of those things, I don't think there'll ever be unanimity on this, but I do have some people who don't like the stuff behind me. They go, Steve, it's too distracting. It's too distracting. And on the other hand, I've had people tell me they love the stuff behind me. And I'm going to tell you right now that I'm going to go on the side of leaving the stuff there. And my thought process goes something like this. Number one, much of the stuff behind me tells a story. So I've written books about these cars, for instance. Italian Hall Disaster, Lawyer Dog, Batmobile. These are all things I've talked about, right? But also, let's be honest here. If there's nothing behind me, like let's say that I'm just like, a guy on TV talking to a camera, John Oliver or something, how long can you look at one guy talking before you get bored with what you're looking at? And I don't put stuff up on the screen that often for you to look at during my regular videos. So my thinking is, if I don't give you something to look at back here, visually you'll get bored. So while some people find it cluttered and confusing, I think other people find it refreshing that they can look at something other than me while I'm talking. And I honestly believe that. So I will try to mix it up back here. I'll try to keep the license plates level and parallel, and I'll try to rotate stuff through to keep it interesting. And I'll try to remember to move the $100 bill, which sometimes I forget, and I apologize, but I do try to move it every video, but sometimes I fail. So that's the story about the backdrop. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Josh. And like I said, come back in 10 years and see if it still looks as good as it does right now, because I bet it does. Questions, comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.